Coop, we're in week 12. This is Bipocalypse. This is going to be a busy week on the waiver wire position. We got to talk about it. Who are some of the players you're really interested in?
Yeah, it's bye weeks. 6 bye weeks this week. Following for Thanksgiving, no bye weeks. And then after that, 6 again. Look at that. The AI schedule maker strikes again. Big time buys this week. I will say, first and foremost, everyone has to be on alert that on Sleeper, on Yahoo, on ESPN, technically, on a technicality, Theo, Anthony Richardson is rostered in less than 50% of leagues on all platforms, but I think he's rostered in at least 40% on most of them. So you know if your league is shallow enough for that guy to hit the waivers, but if he did, you got to grab him because he ran all over the place. If you're looking a little deeper, Theo, where are you thinking?
Yeah, so for me, I think Matt Stafford is another guy that's going to be league-specific. In like deeper formats, he's going to be rostered, but in a lot of formats, he's going to be out there. Bo Nix is rostered these days, but still double check for him in your league. And then Coop, double check based on like the bye weeks, because sometimes people don't prepare for their bye weeks and you'll see weird players cut. This is also a year where the quarterback scoring is sort of topsy-turvy with multiple guys who weren't drafted as QB1s scoring as QB1s. So you could see some weird names sort of out there on the wire. But I'll say our guy, Drake May, a huge game yesterday, a 25-pointer in most scoring formats, looked really good once again. Jameis Winston for the passing volume is going to be there. He's really, really ripping it. Matt Stafford is another guy to check on, Coop. He's available in enough leagues that we need to mention him. Since Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp came back, Kupp and Nacua are both top 12 wide receiver scorers, and Matthew Stafford is the quarterback 7. He has multiple 4-touchdown pass games this season. And then for deeper leagues, it's kind of funny because I didn't think we'd be talking about him earlier in the year, but Will Levis is actually playing very well right now. And in terms of fantasy scoring numbers, he's putting them up. So that's sort of be my quarterbacks. Anybody else that I'm missing, Coop?
Well, yeah, so with Will Levis, we're getting into super flex range. So we have to mention the 2 teams that have the best schedules for passing down the stretch are the Titans, so Will Levis, and the other one is the Giants, Theo. And yes, their schedule is actually insanely easy for passing. The Giants, after their bye week, which they just had, they have no bad matchups rest away. So they just announced Daniel Jones' bench. Tommy Cutlets is going to get a swing at it. Drew Lock could be on the menu. If you're playing the Scott Fish Bowls or the 2 QB leagues or those Superflex leagues where everybody's rostered, I'll tell you what, I bet you Tommy Cutlets is out there. Drew Lock might be out there too. These are the things that could get you over that hump at the end here, especially, like we said, 6 teams on bye this week. 6 teams on bye for week 14. Yowza.
Yeah, I mean, you got to take a look at DeVito, Cutlets, if you're in a deep superflex format, because he's a starting quarterback, and all these guys have viability. And guess what? The Giants have already had their bye week. So we are here. Tommy DeVito back at it. We're going to hear about Tommy Cutlets all week long. We're going to see how it goes, man.
I'm not Italian enough to do a good one of these. I don't know.
I live on Long Island, so I can do whatever. I pronounce all the words correctly. I mean, I'm right over here. What about the running back position? There's not like a whole lot of standouts. We were completely the rug was completely pulled out from under us with Audric Estime this past week.
Right.
So big apologies there. Anybody who consumed my waiver wire content, Coop's waiver wire content, or our waiver wire content right here, we like to do a do-over with Estime.
But you don't have to apologize for something like that, because we were very clear. Go back and watch the video. We said we could get rug pulled here, like we've done multiple times with Tank Bigsby and Bucky Irving. Those guys have actually been serviceable, but you have to give yourself a shot. Right,
100%.
Because there were a lot of people that sat back and said, Tyrone Tracy, no, I'm not. He's going to be the running back for the Giants, and they got Singletary coming back. I'm not going to go there. You got to give yourself a shot to catch lightning in a bottle every opportunity. So we're going to keep trying to do it, right? So we look around. First thing we do is we look around and say, okay, did anybody go down? Nobody meaningful. We didn't get a James Conner that would unlock Trey Benson. We did get 2 running backs on the Raiders leaving the game. Alexander Madison left with an ankle injury, was ruled out right away. That tells me that he might be banged up for enough to miss at least a week or 2. Who knows? We don't know yet. We're still looking at it. Zamir White also left the game with a quad injury. That tells me if you need somebody for a spot start, Amir Abdullah was already a guy that we mentioned as somebody that was getting the pass work. He was kind of in a Justice Hill, Jerome Ford type role, so he could have some value. Also, keep an eye out for your stashes for Dylan Laube, right? Dylan Laube, as Nathan Yankee over at PFF pointed out, shout out to him, in the preseason, he actually did get kind of a full-time role at certain points, early and late, versus Abdullah, who just got pass downs. So he's the kind of that kind of lightning in a bottle, what if type play. There's not many of them out there. Okay. If Alexander Madison or Zamir White are healthy enough to go, though, they're probably the better bet because they're going to operate on early downs. It's as simple as that. So that's how we're playing it. You got to keep an eye on the injuries, but Amir Abdullah, probably the guy that if you need a spot start for this apocalypse, he might be the starting running back for the Raiders, as crazy as that sounds. If you need a 1 week spot start that has maybe a little more upside, why not Cam Akers, Theo, right? We've seen Aaron Jones suffered the rib injury, and then Cam Akers got double-digit carries and ran double-digit routes in that game with the rib injury. This past week, Aaron Jones played, Cam Akers, double-digit carries, ran double-digit routes. What more can you really ask for from a backup spot? As for spot starts, otherwise, it's kind of the same. What is this, some sort of thunderstorm going on? It's kind of the same guys that it always is, right? It's like standard leagues or half PPR, you're looking at like Tyler Algier, who really only gets carries when they're leading, or on, some of the PPR ones, it's Justice Hill, it's Jerome Ford. For stashes, handcuff stashes, Theo, I know you really like Trey Benson, right? We like the schedule. Talk to us a little bit about Trey Benson. And are there any other names out there? I mentioned Lobby. Everyone knows about the upside of a Braylon Allen, the upside of a Ray Davis if there's an injury. We've talked about Blake Corum behind Kyron Williams. As somebody that could inherit a huge role if something happens. But I know you're in on Trey Benson. Is there anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, Trey Benson to me stands out because those other guys I think needs an injury, whereas I think with Trey Benson, you've seen him kind of sniffing 30% opportunities. I think it could go north of that to keep James Conner fresh, and Benson is just very explosive. You've actually seen him finish as a low-end RB2 for back-to-back weeks. Not something you would have necessarily bet on, but the efficiency kind of propelled him there. So for me, I'm looking for him coming out of a bye week to get an increased opportunity and potentially get some momentum heading into 2025. I like Trey Benson a lot. I'll also mention, just for complete dart throw reasons, Gus Edwards in the revenge game against Baltimore. I don't know what the approach LA is going to have in that game, but I think it's going to be very run heavy, try to keep that Baltimore Ravens offense off the field. That would at least be my strategy in the Harbaugh Bowl. And the Chargers have a lot of momentum right now as a team. Herbert's playing very well. So Gus Edwards, I mean, the guy's getting touches every week. He's completely relegated Kamani Vidal. I think you covered them all, though, Coop.
Yeah.
Wide receiver.
I wanted to mention something real quick before we get to wide receiver, which I just thought of this week when people were talking about the Harbaugh Bowl. Like, we know these guys they're tight. They're brothers. They talk on Thanksgiving. They talk all the time about football. The Ravens got Derrick Henry, and the Chargers hired Greg Roman. The fact that Jim Harbaugh was willing to bring on J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, and that we weren't all over that. I mean, we had mentioned it to some degree. We're like, hey, it's worth a stab. But don't you think he talked to his brother about these players? Don't you think that Jim and John talked? I mean, it's like, I just wish we could go back and have that thought and be like, you know what? These guys are probably going to be in pretty good shape here if they're going from one brother to another with Greg Roman. So anyway, talk to me about some wide receiver.
Yeah, wide receiver, it's not that great a week. I think that there's some interesting names, though, because of the bye weeks. I mean, you've got to talk about Elijah Moore, who's getting consistent targets, and he's available everywhere. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Coop, over his last 2 weeks, nearly 200 receiving yards, had another touchdown catch. He's in there. Nick Westbrook-Akini has found the end zone in so many games. It's just wild. Again, not a high volume target, though. I think Quentin Johnston, it's going to be league specific if he's available to you. And got to talk about Kayshon Boutte. Like, Kayshon Boutte is really a full-time player. And this is a guy who we haven't really seen massive numbers, but the guy's getting like 4 catches every single game. And in these bye weeks, it's like, it's bottom of the barrel guys become more viable. My guy, Ray McLeod. Ray McLeod is interesting because I think if Darnell Mooney misses time with the hamstring injury, McLeod would be a guy that's in the starting lineup for you in most deep formats. McLeod's been good this year, and he's been a guy who's consistently had like a 14% target share for the season. So you would think that he would take a nice big step forward. Anybody I'm missing?
I mean, there's just names that we have to kind of throw out for the very, very crazy deep leagues. And I always think back to the movie Basketball. You've seen Basketball, Theo?
1,000,000 times.
Right. So first you get the jobs, then you get the khakis, then you get the money, then you get the girls, right? This is how it works in fantasy football as well. First, you get the snaps, then you get the targets, then you get the fantasy points. So how did we get Kayshon Boutte, right? He got the snaps, now he's getting the targets, right? Now he's starting to get the fantasy points. So we look around and say, okay, who's starting to get the snaps? Nick Westbrook-Akine plays like the whole game, right?
Yeah.
So I look around and it's like, okay, the Broncos, after Cortland Sutton, it's wide open. Devon Vele, for the past couple games, has started to get some of those snaps. Right now, Josh Reynolds could come back. I know he practiced this past week and ruined all that, but these are open situations, right? So we're talking insanely deep leagues, but these are names of players that are playing 50 snaps in games in the NFL. So you should at least know them.
100%. Who you got at the tight end position this week, Coop?
Tight end is the same as it's always been every week. It's all year, and he still has not cracked 50% rostership out there. We've been telling you, Hunter Henry. Even last week for the down week, he got an 89% snap share. He ran 87.5% of the routes, and he got a 16% target share. It was 4 targets out of 25. That's 16% still. So Hunter Henry, if you stuck with him and you were smart, great. You were rewarded with 9 targets this week. Alex Van Pelt said that he was the number one guy that they schemed things up for. He said he likes the scheme. Austin Hooper's there floating around. Doesn't matter. Hunter Henry's the best guy available under 50% of leagues. The other one we can't ignore here is basically he's West Coast Zach Ertz. That's what Will Disley is right now. The Dizzler, dude. What are you gonna do, right? It's like he's not particularly athletic. He doesn't even play the whole game. But when he's out there, they get him the ball, man. They get him the ball. He makes things happen. He scored a touchdown this week. So you're not going to get much in the athleticism department, just like Zach Ertz, but he's getting the targets. He's making it happen. And I mean, the craziest stat on him is that if you look at the targets per route run, I think you were the one that pointed this out to me, that from you and Scott Barrett's show that you guys do, that's really great, that he's getting the second most targets per game,
it's
per route run of any tight end behind Evan Engram. He will not be denied. If you're looking at spot starts, a guy like A.J. Barner we were staying off of because of the worst possible matchup there is, which is the 49ers, in my opinion. Fred Warner, Devondre Campbell, killers of otherwise healthy tight ends. But A.J. Barner, he's going to be a little bit, if Noah Fant is out, obviously. Now he gets a little bit better matchup. He played virtually every snap for that team. Chig Okonkwo actually played, nearly 50 snaps compared to like 17 for Josh Wiley. And then, of course, Dawson Knox got good deployment with no Dalton Kincaid. That's a stash because they're on bye this week. But if Dalton Kincaid were to miss any time, he's the guy.
Yeah, and I think that you covered pretty much every single viable tight end. But for me, it's like the Hunter Henry one just doesn't make sense. Do us a favor, pick up Hunter Henry so Coop and I don't have to keep talking about him and writing about him, because guy he's like, especially in these bye weeks, you're going to be really happy you have him on your roster. These bye weeks get super, super ugly, Coop, when there's 6 teams on bye. That's just ugly, ugly time for fantasy managers. So having a guy who can get you 10, 11 PPR points, that becomes viable. You got to remember, when there's 6 fewer teams playing, your league scoring average to win that week oftentimes goes down as well. Let's hope we have a more exciting waiver wire to discuss next week. Right. We got you covered next week right here. Make sure you're smashing that like button. Make sure you're subscribing, and we'll be back soon.